still can't believe it. My wife cheated on me right on our wedding day. I showed her no mercy. I caught my wife cheating on me with our wedding planner on our wedding day. Can you believe that she picked the most important day in our lives as the day to cheat? I have come across many women in my life, but none of them has been as disgusting and stupid as the woman I now call my wife today. Can you imagine the gravity of the situation at hand? There is no form of disrespect worse than stooping so low on your own wedding day. My fellow Redditors, I'm not just going to sit back and act like nothing happened. I'm extremely lucky to have found out the truth, and trust me, now that I know, that woman is going to get what's coming for her. It was so close that I almost didn't know the true nature of what happened. If I had been like one of those men to fall helplessly in love with a woman, I'd have been crushed like a freaking pie. I'm thankful that I did not listen to my stupid friends who told me not to be suspicious of my own partner. Lol. Maybe they expected me to blindly follow her like I was a fool. I don't believe in the concept of trusting a woman so much that you turn a blind eye to the signs that are obviously in front of you. I'd rather end a relationship because the woman did not like my alertness than end a relationship because I found out I was being cheated on. There's nothing more devastating than finding out that the man you've been paying to plan your wedding has been sleeping with your wife. Indirectly, I've been paying this man to sleep with the woman I wanted to marry. Well, technically, I'm already married to her, and that's what makes the situation worse than it already is. The discovery of something so deceitful is the most annoying thing ever. Right now, I can't even help but think that my friends could have been in on it. I believe this because they have been against all the suspicions I had for my wife. Anytime I brought it up, they'd advise me to forget about it and focus on the wedding. Oh, let me clarify something. I only saw signs of my wife's cheating behavior a day before our wedding. Why did I not call it off? Like I said, I saw signs. I was not sure. She did not give anything away. I could not just suddenly cancel a wedding with over 150 people in attendance, just because I saw signs I was not sure of. Now, this is the part where I blame my family and her family. The pressure that people put on you before your wedding makes you blinded to everything just because you cannot imagine canceling all the plans you have made. Before I go on with this experience of mine, let me give you all an insight into the relationship I have with my wife and how I met her. My name is Daniel, and I am a 29-year-old man who is married to Andrea, a 27-year-old woman. I met Andrea at a friend's wedding, and the funny thing is that I even brought a date to the wedding. So, do you want to know how I left the wedding with Andrea? I think things got complicated that day at the wedding reception. The couple we were celebrating are very versatile couples who are hard party animals. They live for parties and a good time. So, of course, their wedding had numerous varieties of drinks and shots. We drank, and we honestly almost exceeded our limit. I can hold my alcohol very well. I can hold my alcohol insanely well, to be honest. But I don't know what those people added to those drinks. I got drunk for the first time in my whole life that day. I wasn't the only one in attendance who got drunk. Everybody did, including the couples. Andrea was not left out of the dunk squad, and that's how we started talking. I don't even know where my date went that night and how I ended up in my apartment with Andrea. The next morning was when everything came crashing down on me like a bucket of ice water. I had a one-night stand with Andrea. We all know one-night stands are not uncommon, but it was a big deal for me since I'm very particular about the people I interact with. For me to have left my date and went home with Andrea, I knew I had to be extremely drunk that night. My date did not contact me after that day again, and I was left as a single man. To my surprise, Andrea messaged me the next day after she left my apartment in the morning. I was surprised to see her message because I did not recollect asking her for her phone number. My fellow Redditors, the truth is that Andrea actually took my phone number from my phone that night. Yes, my wife was the one who made the first move. I admired her confidence, and that's how we started talking. We would hook up once in a while, but it soon got heated, and then we started dating. We dated for 4 years. And trust me, guys, it was an on and off dating. We weren't really a stable couple for the first 2 years. We would break up, then get back together again, and it went on and on. I really felt like she was my soulmate because we always seemed to find each other all over again. We dated seriously for 2 years straight, and that's when we decided to get married. I proposed to her and she said yes. That's how the journey started. To be honest, the wedding preparations are always the things that ruin marriage and the compatibility of the couple. If the couple are able to withstand the tedious wedding preparations and family rivalry, you can boldly say that they have a strong will to be together. To be honest, I'll say this to you all. Our wedding preparation was insane. Our families are the exact opposite of each other. They have different tastes in everything. Planning the wedding had to be one of the worst periods of my life. Her family wanted a big wedding, and my family wanted a small wedding. I had to put my foot down and let them know my wife and I hold the final say on how our wedding should go. Andrea and I finally decided to have a wedding that was not too big or small. We cut down the guest list to 150 people, and that's how we made it work. My fellow Redditors, let's get to the whole starting point of this story. The wedding planner who had been fucking my wife. We all know how it's always normal for a woman to take charge of the wedding planning. I mean, it's always the woman who wants the wedding to be perfect and dreamy, like she wants it. I never had a problem with Andrea taking charge of the wedding. To be honest, the wedding was bigger than I wanted it to be. Her family initially wanted a guest list of 250 people. I don't even know how they know that many people in the first place. We had to cut it down to 150 because I made it clear that I was not comfortable with so many people. I initially wanted just 90 people present. Having so many people only brought a bigger workload, but Andrea promised that she would handle things. I really didn't care as long as we had a wedding. But Andrea wanted to go big and extra. She spent nights looking at screens and browsing what the perfect wedding theme would be. At first, I tried to let her do her thing, but consequently, I decided to be a part of it. Not because I wanted to, but because I did not want to overwhelm her. Despite my desire to help, Andrea assured me that she was just fine on her own and didn't need any help. I stopped trying because I did not have the time to waste anyway. Andrea chose the wedding planner and I paid him. That was the arrangement. But I never expected our arrangement to end up with lies and unfaithfulness. My fellow Redditors, the wedding planner was a man. That did sit well with me because I hardly heard of cases where the wedding planner was a man. In fact, up until that moment, I didn't know that there were male wedding planners. I know they usually have male assistants or employees, but I never expected the head wedding planner to be a man. I did not suspect cheating because he was a man. No, it was far from it. I only doubted his ability to carry out the job, and that's why I asked Andrea why she picked him. She told me he was actually a very good wedding planner and that he was very popular in the wedding scene. I know nothing about wedding planners and their social presence, so I did not press further. From the designs he drafted off, he was actually very good at what he did. I made him go through a test my sister prepared, and he aced it. I did not have a problem hiring him, as long as he was good at his job. I do not have low self-esteem, so I was not troubled by having a man plan the wedding as long as he was a professional. Little did I know that this wedding planner was having the time of his life with Andrea. Now that I think about it, I'm really finding the whole situation laughable. This man was practically sleeping with Andrea nonstop, and I only found out on our wedding day. When I say I found out on our wedding day, I mean it was just barely an hour after our wedding and before our reception. But I'll get into that later. Let me tell you all what's really getting on my nerves. You know that it's a normal occurrence for the wedding planner and the bride to spend a lot of time together. They have to pick a dress that matches the decor, the perfect veil that will not contrast with the colors. They have to do everything together so that the bride is satisfied. For the groom, you're mostly just talking about your suit and tie. You have no business with choosing lipstick colors or jewelry. So naturally, I had barely any interaction with the wedding planner. During our wedding preparation, I took a leave from work, but I still had to attend Zoom meetings and try working on my computer. I had to make money. I'm sure my fellow Redditors can agree that wedding expenditures are outrageous. Nobody really cares how much you spent. They just want to see how perfect everything is. For me, it was the same situation. I had to work because I knew there's a life after the wedding, and we'd need to feed too. I don't consider myself a strict man, but I do consider myself a very intentional man. I don't like to lazy around or mince words. I did not hesitate to tell Andrea to cut down her spending. She was spending recklessly, and I was not having it. I warned her to cut everything down. Andrea literally took a whole month leave from work. That meant she was not getting any salary. I had to make her understand that money did not fall on trees. To be honest, our problems began from there. She got offended that I was telling her to watch how she spent my own money. Listen, I'm not a stingy man and I don't have a problem with spending on my wife, but I don't see anything wrong with telling her to watch how she spends money on irrelevant things. I still stand with what I said and there's no changing it. You should be able to respect money that you don't earn and use it for things that make sense. I mean, Andrea wanted us to have our reception on a yacht. Listen, if the guest list contained just under 50 people, I would not have a problem with that. But 150 people was just too outrageous. I was not ready to fund 150 people on a yacht. Can you imagine how much their feeding alone would cost? I made it clear to Andrea that we must have the wedding reception in a hotel. I did not leave room for debate, and I literally put my foot down on that one. I did not expect the reaction I got from Andrea. She began to act like a fucking spoiled brat. Mind you, this happened 2 weeks before our wedding. Andrea became rude and rebellious just because I changed the reception venue. I got so angry at one point that I told her I was going to cut things off if she did not change her attitude. She got scared and apologized to me. I honestly thought she'd keep to her word, and she did, but she did so in her own deceitful way. Even though Andrea stopped overreacting and trying to have an attitude, I still spoke to my friends about it. I told them I was not impressed with her behavior, and I explained why I felt that way to them. If Andrea behaved that way before we started our wedding preparation, I'd have taken a decision without consulting anyone first. But the reason I gave her the benefit of doubt is because I knew how stressful planning a wedding could be. I was stressed myself and understood that the tension and pressure to outdo yourself and make everything perfect can make you lose your personality a little bit. My friends brushed my concerns off and told me it was normal for women to become cranky during their wedding preparations. The married ones even narrated their own similar experiences to me and told me not to worry about it. If only I knew that my own experience came with a cheating scandal. Another reason why I did not give Andrea a hard time is because I felt bad for leaving all the planning to her. I tried to help her several times, but she turned my help down and told me she was just fine doing it alone. It's really not my fault that she took up most of the stress. Sometimes I'd try to input ideas and even help her, but she told me I was just adding to her stress. That discouraged me, and so I left her to do what she really wanted to do. So, as our wedding day drew closer, Andrea was back to her normal self. She stopped having an attitude and she listened to my inputs. I did not find this weird at all because I believed that she was back to her normal self because the wedding stress was coming to an end. I stopped trying to pry into her life and I stopped suspecting her movements. But 2 days to our wedding, I questioned everything I thought was true. We were already logged in at our hotel and we were busy getting ready for bed. Andrea suddenly got a phone call and she rushed out of the room to receive the call. I found this very weird because we never received calls away from each other. Even when it's a call about work, we sit with each other and take the call. There are even times when we put the call on loudspeaker so the other person could hear what was being said. So I obviously knew something had to be fishy if Andrea did not receive the call in front of me. I was pissed off and irritated at the same time. I left the room and decided to go search for her. I did not care how she'd feel if she saw me following her. A wedding was not a joke, so I had to be sure my wife was aware of that. I found her in the hallway whispering into the phone, and that's when I lost it. I walked up to her and tried grabbing the phone from her hands. She ended the call immediately and asked me why I disrupted her call. I asked her why she found it hard to receive the call in the room, and she gave the excuse of not wanting to disturb me. I told her I did not mind, and she was aware of that. Andrea tried to brush it off by telling me she was tired and that we needed to go to bed, but I was not having it. My fellow Redditors, I had to make sure she told me what the call was about. Andrea got annoyed and told me she was talking to a relative of hers who needed directions on how to get to the hotel. That was a lame excuse, and I told her I did not buy it at all. This is to tell you guys how vigilant I'd been, but I was still played like a fool at the end of the day. I made Andrea understand that her suspicious movements were only making me have second doubts about the wedding. She got upset when I told her that and explained to me that she was really talking to a relative. She even went as far as showing me the call log. The number was saved as Aunt. Well, my fellow Redditors, I just discovered that Andrea's aunt has a beard and looks like a man. Oh wait, he looks like our wedding planner. He is our wedding planner. I can't even believe the kind of lame excuse I fell for that day. Of course I believed her, and went on with it. How am I expected to suddenly guess she was lying to me? It's ironic if you think about it. You know, sometimes you get caught up in situations that are not ideal at all. I'm a witness to that, and I can tell you this for free, it's always irritating. There is nothing more annoying than being blindsided and lied to many times. Everything only makes sense when you have found out the truth. But before the truth is out, it's almost like you're going around a maze and you do not know the direction to take. One day before my wedding, I was practically going around a maze because Andrea was making me doubt a lot of things. My fellow Redditors, imagine what I was thinking when I saw these signs 24 hours before I tried the knot. The preparations were intensifying, and guests had started arriving. My colleagues from work and my relatives from far and near were present. Even my boss made it to my wedding. Everything seemed fine that day, until Andrea gave me a reason to worry again. I was not worried about her. I was worried about making a fool of myself in front of so many people. I needed to know why Andrea was nowhere to be seen a day before our wedding. Yes, Reddit, you read that right. Andrea practically vanished from the room, and I did not see her for a very long time. Anyone I asked told me she went shopping for a last-minute design for the wedding. I did not like how that sounded at all. The wedding planner was supposed to be the one in charge of running errands like that. I asked them why the wedding planner did not go get it, and they said he accompanied Andrea. Yes, I'm telling you the facts. Andrea left the hotel with the wedding planner to get whatever design she needed to get. You all needed to see how mad I was that day. I was practically livid. I did not appreciate the fact that Andrea left the hotel with the wedding planner without letting me know first. It felt like she was just going around making whatever decisions she thought were right. She did not consult me first. If I left the hotel like that without her knowledge, I'd probably be tagged the heartless fiancé who does not let his wife know where he's going. But Andrea did not think twice before doing what she did. Even then, I did not suspect that Andrea was cheating on me. I did not even suspect that she had anything to do with the wedding planner at all. That's just me telling you how secretive they had been. I know some of you might comment that I was a fool not to notice the signs, but that is just because you all already know where this is headed. I did not know back then. I could not even think of it. It's just like a woman finding out her husband is sleeping with her best friend who is her chief bridesmaid. Let's say she saw them together on many occasions, but she did not suspect a thing until she found out they were actually sleeping with each other. That's the same case for me. There's no way I suddenly thought about the prospect of my wife sleeping with our own wedding planner. It's not something that happens every day. When Andrea came back with the wedding planner that day, I pulled her to the side and had a very heated argument with her. I inquired where she had been, and she told me she went to get something for the wedding. I asked her why she did not let me know, and she said it slipped off her mind. I did not let her off the hook this time. I was so angry that I asked her if she did not want to get married anymore. She was surprised and asked why I was implying that. To be honest, that day we had a very long argument, and at the end of the day she apologized and promised not to be so careless again. It's not the best situation to have an argument a day to your wedding day, but it's not an unlikely situation. It happens a lot, and I know this because I've attended many weddings before. The bride and groom argue and have differences even on the very day of their wedding. Andrea begged for my forgiveness and told me the wedding stress was making her forget things, and that's why she forgot to let me know a heat of time. I thought about it for a while and decided to let it go. To be honest, I could also see that she was stressed with the wedding, but scratch that. I can now tell that the source of her stress was just as a result of her trying to juggle her secret affair with planning the wedding. Everything that happened to her during that period was all her fault. Andrea is to be blamed for how everything turned out. She made poor, deceitful decisions and thought she could be quirky about it. Now, let me tell you all what happened on the wedding day and how I found out she was cheating on me with the wedding planner. Our wedding day came and we were really excited. You know that feeling of satisfaction when everything you have worked so hard for is finally happening before your eyes? You feel content and extremely grateful to witness it. That feeling was no different from what I felt. In my case, I'd spent a lot of money on the wedding, So when I saw how it turned out, I was super excited. A day before the wedding, I had a bachelor party and so did Andrea. Andrea had a bridal shower. It was like a remake of how we met each other for the first time. Just like that day, we both got drunk and spent the night together. I woke up with a headache on my wedding day, but I was lucky enough to get some hot soup, which helped with the hangover. I did not see Andrea in the morning because she went to get ready. I also spent time getting ready for the wedding. It felt good to see our family members together. They all seemed happy for us, and I was really glad that they could make it. If I'm correct, there had to be more than 150 people at the wedding that day. Thankfully, I did not agree to having the wedding on the yacht, so I was not really bothered. After we said our vows in church, it was time for us to go get some rest before we went to the reception. Andrea had to go change her dress and I had to go change mine too. I also wanted to take a shower because I was very tired. The reception hall was set up at that time and some of the guests were already getting ready to go to the venue. After taking a shower and changing my clothes, I decided to go in search of Andrea. I forgot to give her the bracelet I bought for her the night before. I felt like the bracelet would look good on the reception dress she was going to wear. It took me some time to find the room Andrea was logged in because I'd not seen the room in the morning. We separated to get dressed and chose separate rooms to get ready. While I was still in search of her room, I was very excited to be a married man. I kept thinking about the bumps we had before getting married and how we met each other at a friend's party. I think it's safe to say that I was practically going down memory lane that day. I had to ask a worker at the hotel where Andrea's room was before I was directed there. I was so excited that I even forgot to knock on the door. I just pushed the door open, but my excitement vanished immediately. I did not expect to see what I'd seen that day. Not in a million years did I think that my own wife will be sprawled on the bed like a whore in her wedding dress, while the wedding planner that was under my fucking payroll was on top of her naked. It felt like the whole world had stopped and was waiting for me to digest the sight I was looking at. Andrea's wedding gown, a gown that I fucking paid for, was ripped off. They were having sex right before my eyes. They were so lost in the act that it took a few seconds before Andrea noticed my presence. I can still remember how her eyes widened infinitesimally and how she pushed the wedding planner off her immediately. I was then able to see the full state of her dress. She looked like a fucking hooker. Her makeup was smeared and her hair was scattered around the place. She opened her mouth to speak, but I grabbed the glass of water near the door and threw it at the bed immediately. I was angry. I was livid, and I swear that it took all my self-control for me not to throw that glass at their heads. Before a second thought, I slapped the wedding planner across the face. The fool had to be less than 24 years old at most. He was slimmer than a model, and I thought he was even gay. But no, the boy I was paying to plan my wedding was sleeping with my wife. Do you know the worst part? They didn't even have the decency to use a condom. I grabbed him by the shoulders and kicked him in the groin. Yes, Redditors, I kicked him there. Andrea jumped out of the bed and started pleading with me. She said she was sorry and blah, blah, blah. I didn't even have time to listen to her. I called out to my elder brother, whose room was just a few rooms away. I continued calling his name till he rushed into the room. He was also shocked to see what was going on. He rushed to my side and asked me if what he was seeing was true. Of course it was, and that's what I told him. I was disgusted, irritated, and disappointed. There are no words to describe the amount of disgust I felt for Andrea and the wedding planner. I felt betrayed, but at that moment, everything began to make sense to me. I finally understood why Andrea sneaked out of the hotel to go buy something the day before. Everything finally made sense to me, but it was just too late. There was nothing I could do because I was already married to her. I was married to a cheater, and she dared cheat on me on our own wedding day. I could not even look at Andrea or listen to her speak, and that's when I hatched my plan. I did not care if I was already married to her or whatnot. I needed to make her regret her actions. I needed to make her shiver in fear whenever she heard my name or even got remotely close to me. There was no way I was going to act like I did not just see what transpired before me. I had no reason to protect a marriage that had no respect for me. Just one look at my brother, and he already knew what I had in mind. He could tell that I wanted to disgrace them, so he asked me what to do. I told him to grab the wedding planner while I grabbed Andrea. He did as he was told, and that was how we grabbed them out of the room. My fellow Redditors, I know you all are wondering what we ended up doing to them. Well, I did what I could think of at that moment that would be extremely embarrassing. I wanted to make sure that I crushed their egos to the limit. You know the funny thing? The huge guest list Andrea and her family were so desperate to have worked to my own advantage. There were over 150 people present, which meant they did not listen to me. But guess what? It ended up ruining them at the end of the day. All the guests were already waiting for us at the reception, and so my brother and I dragged them to the reception hall. The wedding planner pleaded with me to let him at least put on his pants, but I refused. Yes, I refused. Do you think he just stood there and let my brother carry him? Oh no. He tried putting up a fight. But that was when I called on two of my other friends who came too, look for me and ask why we took so much time. So Redditors, 3 men dragged the wedding planner to the reception while I pulled Andrea and followed them. She cried, wailed, and begged for my forgiveness, but I ignored her like the filth she is. I did not care about her tattered clothes, messy hair, or almost exposed boobs. She's shameless, so she should not have a problem with being disgraced in front of the guests. Everyone stood up immediately when they saw us. I could see the obvious shock on their faces. I mean, they all came to witness a wedding, but they were seeing a naked man and almost naked woman. A woman that was supposed to be the bride. Andrea's family rushed towards us with obvious worry on their faces. My fellow Redditors, they looked horrified. They tried to cover her up, and her father even had the audacity to ask me if I was out of her mind. I ignored them and pushed Andrea to the stage with the wedding planner. My parents tried to talk to me and ask me what was going on, but I ignored them too. I was too angry to act reasonably or try to explain anything to anyone, so I just focused on what I wanted to do. Just as I went to grab the mic from the MC, Andrea tried running away, but my brother was able to grab her on time. Even the wedding planner did not dare move. He just squatted and hid his face because he was aware of his full nudity. His only saving grace was the towel that one of his employees threw to him. That's what he used to cover himself up. Using the mic, I told everyone how I just found my newly wedded wife sleeping with the wedding planner in her hotel room when she was meant to be changing into her reception dress. My fellow Redditors, I can still remember the gasps that echoed in the hall that day. Before I could even start the next sentence, people grabbed their phones and started recording the scene that was unfolding before them. For the first time in my entire life, I was happy to have a huge crowd present. I told everyone how Andrea must have been sleeping with this wedding planner for a long time. Well, I was not wrong, guys, because I discovered that they started having an affair the moment she hired him. You should not have allowed her to keep the wedding planner. Those were the words some people said to me. I laughed in their faces and called them cowards. It sounds stupid to try and blame me for someone else's poor choices. I should have stopped her from cheating. What's that supposed to mean? A person that wants to cheat will cheat. They don't need an excuse. Cheaters do not need to be given excuses for decisions they made when sober. Andrea tried to turn the tables around and tell me how I cheated on my date that night when we met. I had to explain to the fool that I was not even in a relationship with the girl I brought. She was my date to the wedding, and we were in the talking stage. I was not dating her, neither was I married to her. I was not her fiancé. Andrea was so dumbfounded that she had to hide her face from the cameras. At that moment, I knew I was done with her, and so I left the reception hall immediately. Thankfully, I'd not given the wedding planner his remaining balance for planning the wedding. Of course, I was not foolish enough to give it to him. I went to Andrea's hotel room with my brother and packed all the dresses she bought for the reception, the jewelry, and even her shoes and bags. I also grabbed her purse. I sold everything off 1 week later and kept the money for myself. I paid for the whole wedding. I might have wasted money on the reception, but I was able to get my money back from the outrageous designer bags and shoes. That's how my wedding ended 2 weeks ago, guys. Talk of plot twists, right? I decided to share this story with Reddit because I'm still shocked from the events. I've not seen Andrea since that day, and I do not plan to see her anytime soon. I filed for annulment the very next day after the wedding, and after a lot of procedures, our marriage will be annulled soon. I think it's right to say I had the worst wedding ever, lol. I'm just very thankful that I found out in time. It was already late, but it could have been worse. If she can cheat on our wedding day, what can't she do? I freed myself from the marriage, and in a couple of days, I'll be legally free and single. Thank you for reading this disgusting experience of mine. I hope you learn a thing or two from my experience. Till next time, Reddit.
To the outside world, I may smile or look as if all is well, but I've been through a lot, and it had all been my fault. You see, I had an affair with my husband's boss, and my husband found out and went after my only family seeking revenge. Before you all come for me, which is fair and fine, my husband had no right going after my mother for something I did. It was me that had slept with his boss. Why did he have to go for my mother? Hi, Redditors, I had an affair with my husband's boss. I didn't know what had come over me to propel me to do that, but I had done it. And it hadn't been a one-time thing. I can't say it had been the devil. That would be an added lie. I might have started it to probably spite my husband. No, this whole situation had started because I had been unhappy with his situation at work. My husband had worked his butt off. He was deserving of a promotion. So I had approached his boss at work. Well, I didn't know that would come back to bite me in the face. My husband had been beyond livid. And a fight started up between the two of us that lasted for more than a week. According to him, I had no right to interfere with his doings at work, and his colleagues now saw him as a sissy. How that was my fault was something I still struggled to understand till this day. I had just been looking out for him because I knew how hard he worked to please his boss. I knew how hard he had worked to be able to at least make the cutoff for the promotion at his workplace. Heck, I had always been the receiving end of his frustration whenever a project hadn't gone well or something wasn't adding up or was amiss. But my husband hadn't gotten where my concern had stemmed from. To him, I had insulted his pride by going to confront his boss. And it's not even as if I'd had a physical fight with his boss. I had just had a little chat with him. Here's how it had happened. It was his workplace annual couples retreat for workers so they could get to know each other and their families. I had been invited as my husband's plus one. If I had known it would start this whole cycle of events, I would have stayed home. Well, my husband and I got there when the party was already underway, with people mingling about in my husband's workplace lobby. It was like a normal office day, but with drinks and chips and outsiders, I think. Well, what had I known? Through the party, I noticed my history kept trying to meet the E of his boss to introduce us. Note at this point, I had thought my husband's boss was the devil's spawn. I hadn't known I would share my bed with the devil's spawn out of spite for my husband. However, through the course of the party, my husband's boss didn't even so much as glance his way. And that added to my anger. When my husband's boss finally deemed it worthy to come our way, was when I had gone to fetch a punch by myself and he just happened to pass by. And as promiscuous as men are, you can guess what happened next. He had the audacity to ask if I was at the party alone, when there was a huge rock sitting on my ring finger and my husband had been doing everything to get his attention. So I told him my mind and mentioned how hard my husband works to be able to make him richer and whatnot. It was uncalled for, but I had raised my voice so loud at him that it had garnered so much attention. From that day, my husband became so cold and emotionally unavailable towards me. At first, I had tried to apologize, to make everything right. I even went to his boss to apologize. He doesn't know about this, but yeah. I had done that in an effort to right my wrongs. I had even hosted him to a romantic dinner, something he hadn't done ever since he started fighting for a promotion in his office. Through the dinner, it was like I was talking to a statue who could only grunt out replies and sometimes not even reply to me. I mean, the straws had been gathering at this point and the camel's back was bordering on breaking at this moment. But I took it in as a good wife who had understood the frustrations of her husband. Was there anything wrong in what I had done? Anyway, the dinner didn't work, and what I did next got me more than just the silent treatment from my husband. I offered to help him get a new job, one of the biggest mistakes I had made in my marriage. A total mistake offering a man who loved to think of himself as the head of the family. You see, I was well-to-do and could pull a few strings to get him a high-status job. I wasn't complaining, and I wanted to do it. I might have even done once or twice without him knowing, but he hadn't accepted the job offers. However, I hadn't known he would take me suggesting to offer him a job as a death sentence. In his words, he had said he would rather die than give me bragging rights over his life. It seemed I hadn't known my husband after all. I had no idea whom I had married. Can you believe it? Before I delve in deeper to my experience on what led me to cheat on my husband, I want to give you all a little backstory about myself, my husband, and how we met. My name is Nora, and I'm 28 years old. My husband's name is Michael, and he's 28 years old. We had met 4 years ago. My husband's college frat had thrown a Halloween party, and I had followed a friend to go. I met my husband because we had both won Best Costume that night. And funny thing, we had matched through some weird twisted string of fate. I had gone as Daphne, he as Fred. That was how we had hit it off. We found out we were both in our second year and became close friends during that time. I had fallen for his charisma and the fact that he wasn't hitting on me because I was already wealthy off pocket. Most of the boyfriends I'd had before him had known I came from money and wanted to reap where they hadn't sown. You all needed to witness how they told me off when I broke it off with them. One had even called me a vain witch. So when I had been getting to know my husband, he hadn't shown those tendencies. Then we started dating a year later, and I introduced him to my family, and I had been right. I hadn't really been a great judge of character in my early adulthood, but I had been glad that I had done the right thing with my husband. We got married once we were done with college, and my husband got a job with his company without my help or the backing of my family. It had been nice watching him work from the scratch to provide for me as his little family. It had been more than nice, actually, but ever since the promotion hunt began, my marriage had turned into a nightmare. One I couldn't cope with anymore, so I had done what I had to do, not sleep with his boss. That came later. The main thing that had had my husband raise his voice and threaten to leave the marriage was when I had gone to see his boss to apologize for the fuss I had caused at the party. I had just wanted to offer an olive branch to his boss to see if maybe he would consider my husband for the promotion position, so I at least could have peace of mind. No. However, that seemed to have irked the life out of my husband, that I got a serious reprimand from him. On that day, I had never seen my husband act that way since I had known him. He was shouting, literally yelling and scattering things around the house and blaming me for all his problems. The words he had said to me wasn't something I could ever utter to someone in my life. They had been vulgar and demeaning and had me wondering how I had made the wrong choice in someone's character once again. Had he been hiding this side all along? How well did I truly know who I had married? I know you all would be thinking my husband shouting a few vulgar and demeaning words at me shouldn't be a reason enough for me to go and start having an affair with his boss. I didn't mean to, though. It had just happened, but I would be truthful and say my husband's demeaning words every night had been a push. Yep, you read right. Every night. My husband demeaned me ever since I had apologized to his boss. He had called me names, mummy's little girl and such, until I was pushed to leave the house because I couldn't take it anymore. I really couldn't. The day I had left the house for my husband to deal with his problems was the day I was pushed to drink. This was another mistake I regretted making. I should have just gone to my mother's place, but no, I had gone to drink away my frustrations with my husband. And I'm sure you guys can guess what happened next. My husband's boss happened next. Of all the bars in Manhattan, it was the one I had gone to nurture my wounds that the major cause of my problems decided to show up at. Talk about the devil. Of course he had to know who I was. That had to be the only reason he had approached me, and in my drunken haze, I had told him I found him handsome. Never drink alcohol, guys. It led to bad decisions. Bad decisions like following my husband's boss home for the night. Maybe I had done it to spite my husband. I admit to that before you all come for me. But someone should be able to understand my point of view. My marriage had already been ruined at that point. So I followed my husband's boss because in my head, my husband and I were over. These had been all my drunken thoughts. Thoughts that I would come to regret. I slept with my husband's boss. I had shared the same bed and exchanged human fluids with someone my husband looked up to at work. Oh my. This was what dawned on me the next morning when I woke up to my husband's call asking me to come home that he was sorry. It was already late. The deed had already been done. Do you guys think I should have told my husband then and there? Update 2. Well, back to narrating my experience. There was really nothing you all's advice could have done because the deed had already happened. I just wanted to know if you guys had been following. After the worst mistake of my life, I went back to my husband's house with guilt choking me to the brim, but I couldn't tell him. I know I had said I already saw my marriage as over, but those had just been the influence of alcohol. I didn't want my husband to leave me. I didn't want my marriage to end. It was one of the handful of things I had gotten right in my short life. I didn't want that ruined. And who hadn't made a cheating mistake before in their marriage? Even a look at another person that wasn't your spouse could be considered cheating. All of us married folks had cheated based on that line alone. So, I couldn't tell him. That would ruin my marriage for sure. I got back home and lied that I had been with my mother for the night. From then on, my husband became the one doing the apologizing. He would get me my favorite treats, take me to the salon, get me whatever it is I wanted. It was like my honeymoon all over again, and I was enjoying it. We talked, we laughed, we played games, and we had dinner together. It was like the quarrel that led to me making the mistake had never happened. It was like a lapse in time and a lapse in my judgment. The baby girl treatment was so beautiful to experience, but the guilt didn't allow me to enjoy it. It was choking, and I had no idea what to do at the time except go with the flow. That's exactly what I did, or that's what I should have done. However, I had dug a grave and had fallen so far into it. Tell me why I had gone back to my husband's boss. No, you don't need to tell me why. I was stupid, that was why, and I had ran back to my husband's boss at the smallest inconvenience. After the haze of my husband's apology phase was over, his frustrations with work and the stress over the office promotion started all over again. And once more, I had been the brunt of it. So I had run to the cause of the problem. My husband's boss had invited me for a drink, and I had told myself I wouldn't go. I wanted to work on my marriage, LOL. The irony. I went. I accepted the drink invitation and went over to my husband's boss place, under the delusion of going to just talk. As you can already guess, we did more than just talk. And this continued whenever my husband's problems became tedious for me to bear. My husband's boss treated me like a person. My husband treated me like a tool to relieve his stress. This time, I knew for sure my marriage was over, and I didn't want to revive it anymore. The problem I had at the moment was telling my husband I wanted a divorce without him finding out the reason behind it. I didn't really want to hurt him. Our problems aside, he had been the first man I had dated that I had actually loved and married, but we weren't working out. I was a soft girl, and I had tried my best in trying to fix his problems, but he had turned it all against me. I couldn't deal with that anymore. I had done all in my power, and now I just wanted to skedaddle. I tended to do that with any glimpse of stress. The affair with his boss, I didn't mean for that to happen, but you can't help who you sleep with, right? You fall for who you fall for. Wrong time and wrong place, but we can't all get it right with the details. Not that I had fallen for my husband's boss. No, I just didn't love my husband anymore for me to be able to cheat on him so freely. That had been my reasoning, and then I decided to end the affair with my husband's boss and also end my marriage. At this point, I don't even know if I was okay, because I wanted to end my marriage without trying to battle out our demons. I had to at least try with therapy. Maybe the feelings would come back and my husband would be able to get his own feelings back under control, and all would be well. So that's the route I took. Instead of confessing to my husband about the affair with his boss or ending my marriage, I decided to end the affair with his boss and register us for therapy. Well, fate had another plan for me. I wasn't superstitious or anything like that. Heck, if you had told me this was the turn my life would take after having an affair with my husband's boss, I wouldn't have believed you. But my life took a turn, a terrible turn at that. My husband's boss didn't allow me to slip from his grasp easily. I was really a terrible judge of character. The day I had gone to end our affair, my husband's boss said if I was going to do that, I should expect that my husband would lose his job immediately, and our affair would come out into the open. He basically threatened me, and I couldn't do anything about it or risk everything going south. I couldn't confess to my husband or he would lose his job because he would definitely go and confront his boss, and I was going to lose my marriage at the end. If I ended the affair, it was still bound to have the same outcome. There was no way out for me. I was toast. A badly burnt toast. So I didn't do anything. I continued the affair and tried to work on my marriage without confessing to my husband. On the bright side, thanks to my affair with my husband's boss, my husband got the promotion he so badly wanted. Yep, it had been a gift, a sacrifice on my part. Everything was finally going well. My husband was happy with his promotion, my secret was kept, nothing was going to go wrong. Lol. I had never been so wrong in my life. My world came to an end when my husband got his hands on security footage of me walking into a hotel with his boss's hand on the small of my waist. I don't know how that had happened. I averted the situation, of course, but that was the beginning of his suspicions. Every time my phone pinged with a text in the night, my husband's eyes would become trained on me. And my husband's boss wasn't helping my situation. He became very annoying and demanding. From calls and late-night texts, he started demanding, I leave my house in the middle of night to come over to his place to see him, or risk my secret coming out in the open. I was being torn in two at the moment. My husband was going to find out. Well, my husband found out, he found out, and everything I thought would happen in retribution happened. There was a big fight in his workplace, which led to him getting fired, and his boss threatened to never write him a good review letter. Everything had just happened so fast that I couldn't keep track of it all. What I had known at that moment was that my marriage was over for certain, and my husband was going to kick me out of the house, and he was going to tell all our friends that I had cheated. That's what I had expected to happen in the coming days after my secret was out in the open. In fact, that was what I had known was bound to happen, but once again, I was proven wrong. I was proven so wrong. The coming days after my husband confronted his boss over my affair had been the most silent days ever. My husband didn't even pretend like I was living in the same house with him. I counted the number of times I had passed by him, and he hadn't even done like a speck of dust had been raised. The silence was as brutal as the guilt that had eaten me up from not telling him. Well, I got used to the silence, however, it was not for long before things changed up again. I kept expecting him to rant and rake and throw me out of the house, but my husband kept doing the opposite. It was scary. From the silent treatment, he progressed to the baby girl treatment. Remember when I said he had acted up from his frustrations from work and had just come home all of a sudden and began treating me like it was our honeymoon? That was the scenario at this moment. He started up again, buying me gifts, takeouts, little heartwarming items. But he wasn't talking to me. He'll just lay them out on the table before going out or going to lock himself up in the guest bedroom. I had no idea what to make of it, and if I tell you, I wasn't scared, I was lying, because I was scared out of my pants. I didn't dare talk to him out of fear of unleashing the beast. I was of the notion that maybe he had seen my point of view without me explaining it to him. I had consulted my friends and asked them for help hypothetically. I didn't tell them about the cheating part, the fact that I'd had an affair with his boss. No, I wouldn't live that down. So I had just told them that I had done something wrong and needed to right it. Something along the lines of, if they were in my shoes, what would they have done? Sort of like I'm asking you guys. Well, they advised me to talk it out with him, and communication is the key, blah, blah. Yeah, it's not like that's something I didn't know. I knew the oldest trick in the book, but it wasn't that easy. The person I had married wasn't that easy to communicate with, especially when I had done something as drastic as this. He could definitely end me if I even breathed the same air. Luckily, I didn't. I didn't have to, because he started talking to me again. Yeah, I was as confused as you all are right now when my husband uttered his first word to me after finding out that I'd had an affair with his boss. And it had been a question on whether my mother still ran our family company. I had been totally surprised and still confused as to why he wanted that information. I got my answer a few days later. Apparently my husband went to confront my mom. Yep, he had stooped to that level, and it was unbelievable, like I could understand him confronting me or something. Heck, he could have done just that, but my mom. What had my mom got to do with it? Well, I soon found out. After my husband had gone over to my mom's place of work and threatened hell on earth, he had come back to throw my things out of the house. He hadn't even waited for me to gently pack. Nope. He had thrown my things out onto the driveway like the very sight of them had him on fire. I guess the honeymoon phase was over, and what I had done was just dawning on him. At least I was no longer confused as to what was going to happen with my husband. I was going to ask my family lawyer to draft up the divorce, and then I would go on with my life. But it seemed my husband had other plans. About a week after my husband threw me out and I packed my things back to my family house, Divorce papers arrived in the mail. That was the beginning of chaos with my husband. After the divorce papers came in, the threats followed suit almost immediately. My mother had inherited our family's plastics business after my father and was a major shareholder in the company. This was what I had meant when I said my family was well-to-do. However, she had people who had invested majorly into the company from the days my dad was alive. I had no idea what to make of that since I had no interest whatsoever in towing the family line of business. But it had been something she had been drilling into my head since I was in high school. According to her, they were people watching and waiting for our downfall, so I should always be on my best behavior. It was as if we were in a drama or a soap opera, with the way she had said it. But I refused to believe people didn't have better things to do with their lives than watch someone else's. My family wasn't keeping up with the Kardashians, so I paid no mind to what she had said back then. Not that there was anything I had ever done that could bring disgrace to my family. I was Miss Goody Two-Shoes until this saga with my husband. Somehow along the line of us dating, I had probably told him how my mother was big on keeping a healthy public image and whatnot. I didn't know he was going to use it against me. I had no idea that in the coming future, he would make me regret ever telling him anything about my life or knowing him in the first place. And he truly did make me regret ever knowing him. My husband decided to use my mother's weakness against her by threatening to tarnish our image to every news and media company he could find. Apparently, he had gathered evidence of me having an affair with his boss and decided to use it to set himself up for life. In his own words, I owed him after making him go crazy and lose his job. He had said it was the least I could do. Can you imagine the audacity of that man? He didn't know everything I'd ever done in our marriage had been for him. If it wasn't for him, it was because of him, and he thought he had the right to say, to even think, I owed him. Men truly had no shame. My husband truly had no shame. Heck, I had even offered to help him procure a job when the other one wanted to eat him alive, and he had turned me down only for him to resort to this. This stupid tactic, blackmailing my mother to make up for his shortcomings. Man, I was beyond enraged. I was livid, if there was a better word to describe how I felt. I was ready to have him arrested after I signed the divorce papers because no one made a nuisance of my family like that. I thought I had known who I had married, but I couldn't have had stupid plastered on my forehead any more than this. My mother was all for keeping things under the wraps about my divorce and the affair. I didn't mind. I really didn't care if people found out I had an affair with my husband's boss. I was telling whoever cared to listen that I had tried my best in my marriage. I had done what I had thought was best for my husband. He had gotten the promotion he wanted, hadn't he? Even though it had come at the expense of me sharing my bed. And I was already so deep that the only way to come out had been to hurt him. Sure, I had hurt him either way, but I never wanted things to reach that point in my life. The first time was a mistake. The second and third times had been out of frustration and someone to talk to, and the rest times hadn't been of my own will. I know I shouldn't be justifying cheating on my husband with his boss, but I need someone to understand my situation. I truly hadn't meant to, but if I hadn't done it, when would the man I had married show his true colors like this? When I'd popped out his kids? When I didn't have anyone to fall back on? I really needed to know how to be able to judge people's character on the first meeting. Was there a class someone could take for that? Well, I signed the divorce papers and handed it over to my lawyer, not wanting to have anything to do with my husband anymore. Absolute good riddance. My mother paid off his blackmail money, and I knew it wasn't a matter of time before he came back for more. Once a snake, always a snake. One could never hide their true colors forever. However, before my husband squandered the money my mother had paid him, he had asked for a meeting between me and my lawyer to finalize the divorce. I didn't want to see the bastard again, but I wanted to watch his face as I threw back everything I had ever done for him in our marriage, and how he had treated me like garbage. And I also wanted to know the reason he had proposed a meeting in the first place. Of course, as you could all guess, my husband proposed a meeting to gloat and call me all sorts of wicked names you could come up with within your vocabulary. I had just sat back and watched the person I had said I do to diminish my whole life with his words. It had been painful because I truly loved him, and even though I had said I had done it out of spite at the beginning, I realized it's one of the stupid things you do to help the people you love. Well, something along those lines, but I was greatly disappointed because I remembered how excited I was on our wedding day. I remembered how I couldn't wait to end the day with his ring and his name as mine. I had been giddy on my wedding day because I was so sure I was getting married to my best friend and the love of my life. I sat back at his lawyer's office and just couldn't believe I had been so wrong with a decision that was meant to be for life. In the face of problems, my husband showed his true colors. When he was done, trust me, I wasn't one to sit back and let someone hurl over me. I told him exactly what I thought of him. I told him how I had always been there for him in our 1-year disaster marriage. I told him how it all began and how all I wanted to achieve was easing his stress. Meanwhile, I knew if the situation was turned around, he wouldn't have done anything about it from the looks of things. He came at me that doesn't justify my sleeping with his boss, and of course I knew that. It was one of the things that was eating deep at me. I apologized for that, and there was nothing in the world that could compare to how sorry I was. But I told him I was glad it happened because without it, our marriage was still a disaster bound to happen. He had never appreciated anything I had ever done for me. He only tried to apologize when it finally dawned on him that he had been a very terrible person. And that's when he would try to buy my gifts and stuff I could very well buy for myself. I told him all that, and apparently my husband couldn't take it from the way he rained insults down on me and my family. Well, that didn't matter to me. I had said my piece. I lied. I found out how much damage my enraged husband could do to my mother and the family company. Apparently, he wasn't blushing when he had said he had evidence of me having an affair with his boss. It was like a dream, like I was living in a fairy tale that had turned to a nightmare. Luckily, it had just been within our family, but unfortunately it was a dent to my mother's name, as I was dubbed the wayward daughter who went about sharing my bed with any available man when I had a husband. I had fielded calls from every side of my family on the morning that my ex-husband had decided to release the news. I hadn't known how he had done it, but he had sent evidence to every male member in my family. As a result of this, those who had been eyeing my mother's position reared their ugly heads and started questioning her position as a chairman if she couldn't train her daughter right. My ex-husband had timed his revenge perfectly, and I had thought he was simply going to ask for more money. Lowell, I had underestimated him. It was then I understood what my mother had meant by, we needed to maintain a healthy public image. I had thought there was never going to be a situation where her advice would come in handy, but I understood perfectly at that moment. I had failed her. The news of me cheating on my husband spread through my extended family quickly, and conspiracy theories started coming up as to whether my mother had done the same thing as me, because where else could I have gotten the trait from? It was so sad to watch my mother being torn apart by the backlash within our family. This was why I said I never wanted to get involved with things concerning my family. As a result of my disgrace, the group of major decision-makers in my family decided my mother was unfit to lead the company. All because I thought I was doing what was right for my husband, who had now put me in this mess. My mother was asked to vacate her position as the CEO and forced to retire. I know this was supposed to make me reflect on what I had done wrong, but it just made me hate men the more. From my ex-husband to his boss to my stupid uncles who thought my mother was their toy to discard at a whim. Well, this was how my ex-husband went after my husband because of the mistake I had made. If I could turn back the time I would go back to before I had provoked him, because that's what had led to all this. My mother had faced disgrace and retirement because of my decision. I didn't mean for that to happen. I had ruined her public image, the one she tried so hard to maintain. I had made a mistake that had cost my mother a position she loved, a position that had kept her close to my dad, according to her. I had learned my lesson big time with this. I hope as you read this, you didn't feel judgmental towards me because this could happen to anyone. A mistake could lead to a list of downfalls in your life. This is why, in whatever you do, you must choose right. Lol, don't be like me who thought I was doing the right thing but ended up causing a disaster in my life and my mother's. This might sound like a funny story experience. I wish that's how it was for me, so at least I could wipe off the disappointment from my mother's face whenever I see her. She still tries to mask it, but I see it. All in all, I hope you guys here get the sense to be a better judge of character. That's something I'm still learning, as it had put me in ruin from my experience. Well, that's it for me, Redditors. Bye.